My name is Naomi, 27 years old, and I always believed family meant sticking together through thick and thin. When Mom remarried a wealthy businessman when I was 16, I thought we finally had our happy ending. Instead, I found myself facing an unimaginable betrayal, my own mother telling me I had to leave because my stepdad didn't like me. But let me tell you, when I finally walked away, I made sure I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Before we dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation. Please like and subscribe if you've ever felt unwelcome in a place that should have been home. Growing up, it was always just Mom and me against the world. My mother, Lisa, worked multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but it was filled with love. We had our Sunday morning pancake tradition and movie nights where we would build pillow forts in the living room. Mom always made time for me despite her exhausting schedule. Things weren't always easy financially. I remember wearing hand-me-downs and learning to appreciate the little things. But what we lacked in money, we made up for in our bond. Mom was my best friend, my confidant, my rock. When I had nightmares, she would let me crawl into her bed. When I struggled with math homework, she would sit with me until we figured it out together, even after working a 12-hour shift. Our life changed drastically when I was 16. Mom met Gerald at the bank where she had recently started working as a teller. He was a wealthy investment banker who came in regularly. She would tell me stories about this charming, successful man who always had a kind word for everyone. After months of him stopping by her window more often than necessary, he finally asked her out. Their courtship was like something out of a fairy tale. Gerald showered Mom with attention and gifts. He took her to fancy restaurants I had only seen in movies. For their third date, he flew her to New York for the weekend, something Mom had never experienced. I was happy for her truly. After years of struggling and putting me first, she deserved some happiness. When I first met Gerald, he seemed perfect. He brought an expensive art set for me after Mom mentioned I enjoyed drawing. He asked about my interests and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He even helped me with my college research, offering advice on business programs, since that was his field of expertise. Their wedding was a lavish affair at Gerald's country club. Mom looked beautiful in her designer gown, so different from the hardworking woman I had known all my life. We moved into Gerald's massive house in the prestigious part of town shortly after. My new bedroom was twice the size of our old apartment with a bathroom all to myself. I had never lived anywhere so nice. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. Gerald would bring souvenirs from his business trips for both of us. He included me in weekend plans, taking us both to shows and fancy dinners. He even mentioned helping with my college tuition when the time came. Mom seemed happier than I had ever seen her, finally able to quit her second job and enjoy life a little. But the honeymoon phase didn't last. Gradually, I noticed Gerald becoming colder toward me. It started with small things. He would ask about Mom's day, but not mine. Family movie nights became less frequent, and when they did happen, he would choose films he knew I didn't enjoy. If I joined them in the living room, he would suddenly remember work emails he needed to send. I tried everything to connect with him. I learned to cook his favorite meals, surprising him after long work days. I asked questions about his business, genuinely trying to understand his world. I kept my music low, made sure to clean up after myself, and always expressed gratitude for living in his home. But nothing seemed to warm the growing chill. Meanwhile, Mom began to change too. Her wardrobe transformed from practical to designer. She joined the country club ladies for lunch and spa days. She started referring to our old life as when we were struggling, as if it was some shameful past. The mom who once made treasure hunts out of shopping at thrift stores now turned up her nose at anything less than luxury brands. Despite living in a mansion, I felt increasingly claustrophobic. My opinions at dinner were overlooked. My presence in family photos seemed an afterthought. Though surrounded by expensive things, I missed the warmth of our tiny apartment, where I had felt truly at home. I started working part-time at a local bookstore while attending community college. Gerald made it clear that while he had this huge house, it was his house. I felt I should contribute something, maintain some independence. Mom thought it was unnecessary, but something in me knew I needed to have my own money. Looking back, it was one of the smartest decisions I ever made. As months passed, the distance between us grew. The house was large enough that Gerald could easily avoid me, and increasingly he did. Family dinners became rare, with Gerald often working late or having business dinners. When he was home, the temperature in the room seemed to drop when I entered. Mom noticed but would quickly change the subject or make excuses for his behavior. "He's just stressed about work," she would say. Or, "Gerald isn't used to having a teenager around." But I was doing everything possible to be the perfect stepdaughter. The harder I tried, the more he seemed to resent my very existence. What hurt most was watching Mom slowly slip away from me, becoming a satellite orbiting Gerald's world, with me somewhere on the outer edges, gravity weakening by the day. I will never forget my 21st birthday. For weeks, Mom had been promising a special celebration. 21 is a milestone, she had said. Gerald and I have something wonderful planned. I was excited, thinking perhaps this would be a turning point in our relationship. Maybe Gerald had finally accepted me as part of the family. That day, I had an early class followed by a shift at the bookstore. I rushed home afterward, eagerly anticipating whatever surprise they had planned. When I walked through the front door, I found Mom in a cocktail dress and Gerald in a suit, but they weren't dressed up for my birthday. There was no cake, no cards, no gifts. "Oh, Naomi," Mom said, looking flustered. "I completely forgot today was the dinner with the Andersons. Gerald needs to close this deal." Gerald barely glanced at me. "We have important clients coming. Business dinner." The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had forgotten my birthday, or at least that's what they claimed. "Could I join you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It is my birthday after all." Gerald frowned. "This is a business matter. Perhaps you could stay in your room during the dinner. Having you there would just complicate things." Mom didn't contradict him. She just gave me an apologetic smile and squeezed my arm. "We'll celebrate another day, sweetheart. There's leftover pasta in the fridge." I retreated to my room, fighting back tears. Through my door, I could hear the dinner party arriving, laughter and conversation floating up the stairs. Curiosity and hurt drove me to quietly make my way down to the landing where I could overhear the dinner conversation. That's when I heard it. One of the guests asked Gerald if he had children. His response shattered what was left of my illusions about our family. "I have one daughter, Brianna," he said proudly. "She's studying at Princeton, top of her class." Not once did he mention me, not even as his stepdaughter. In that moment, I realized I was a ghost in my own home, invisible and unwanted. The next morning, Mom came to my room with a small cupcake and a gift card. "Happy belated birthday, honey. I'm so sorry about yesterday. It completely slipped my mind with all the preparation for the dinner." I accepted her apology outwardly, but inside something had broken. Later that day, while Mom was out shopping, I found her planner in the kitchen. Flipping through it, I saw my birthday clearly marked. Next to it was written, "Naomi's 21st, dinner at Giovanni's 7 p.m. But it had been crossed out and replaced with dinner with Andersons, 7 p.m. It hadn't been forgotten. It had been replaced with something Gerald deemed more important. That same week, a large package arrived at the house. Gerald's daughter Brianna was visiting from college that weekend. The package contained an expensive designer handbag and jewelry for her birthday, which was still 2 months away. Gerald wanted to give her the gifts during her visit. I watched from the staircase as he presented them to her, beaming with pride as she exclaimed over them. The contrast was stark. My birthday was erased for a business dinner. Brianna's was celebrated months in advance with gifts that cost more than all my possessions combined. I called my best friend Taylor that night and told her everything. "Naomi, this isn't normal," she said firmly. "What they did was cruel, whether they realize it or not." "Maybe they really did forget," I said, still making excuses for them. "Mom has been so busy with her charity committee." "Stop defending them," Taylor insisted. "Your mother crossed out your birthday dinner for a business meeting. That's not forgetting, that's choosing. And Gerald is actively pushing you out of the family narrative. You need to see this pattern for what it is." I didn't want to believe her, but deep down I knew she was right. Still, I clung to the hope that things would improve, that Mom would remember the bond we once shared. that Gerald would eventually accept me, that we could somehow become the family I had initially hoped for when they married. But that hope was built on quicksand, and I was slowly sinking. After the birthday incident, Gerald became increasingly bold in his efforts to make me feel unwelcome. What had once been subtle now became painfully obvious. The atmosphere in the house grew more tense with each passing week. One afternoon, I came home from class to find my belongings had been moved from the bathroom I used. All my toiletries, makeup, even my prescription medications were stuffed into a box outside my bedroom door. "I had the master bathroom remodeled, so I'm using your bathroom temporarily," Gerald informed me when I asked about it. "You can use the guest bathroom downstairs." The temporary arrangement lasted 3 months long after his bathroom renovation was complete. It was a small thing perhaps, but it sent a clear message my space wasn't really mine. Another time I returned from a weekend visiting Taylor to discover Gerald had cleaned my desk area. Important papers from college, including notes for an upcoming final exam, were missing. "I thought they were trash," he said with an unconvincing shrug when I frantically searched for them. "You should be more organized." These accidents happened with increasing frequency. My mail would disappear. Items would be moved without my knowledge. The password to the home Wi-Fi would change and no one would remember to tell me. At dinner one evening when I mentioned applying for an internship, Gerald interrupted. "Just remember whose house you're living in," he said. "We've been very generous allowing you to stay here rent-free while you attend that community college." The way he said "that community college" dripped with disdain, as if my education was somehow lesser because I hadn't gone directly to a 4-year university like his precious Brianna. Mom sat silently pushing food around her plate. Later, when I confronted her privately, she just sighed. "He pays for everything, Naomi. This house, the cars, the bills. Try to be more grateful." I was grateful. I just didn't understand why gratitude had to come with erasure of my existence and dignity. The situation escalated during a family dinner with extended relatives. Gerald's sister and her husband were visiting along with my mother's brother and his wife. I had always been close to my Uncle Jim and Aunt Paula, who remembered what our life was like before Gerald. During dinner, I shared news about an award I had received for an essay competition at college. "That's wonderful, Naomi," Aunt Paula said warmly. Before anyone else could comment, Gerald cut in. "If only she put that much effort into keeping her room clean. You should see the state of it." My room was immaculate. I made sure of it, knowing Gerald would use any excuse to criticize me. "Actually, I cleaned just yesterday," I said quietly. "Well, your definition of clean and mine clearly differ." Gerald laughed, looking around the table as if inviting others to join in mocking me. No one laughed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Later that evening, Uncle Jim pulled me aside. "Is everything okay with you and Gerald? He seems unusually harsh." I downplayed it, not wanting to create family drama. But Uncle Jim wasn't fooled. "Your aunt and I are here for you, kiddo. Always. Don't forget that." A few days later, I overheard Mom on the phone discussing summer vacation plans. Gerald had apparently booked a trip to Europe for the three of us. I was cautiously excited until I heard Mom's next words. "Actually, it will just be Gerald and me. Naomi will be staying home to focus on her summer classes." This was news to me. While I was taking one summer class, it was online and wouldn't have interfered with a vacation. When I questioned Mom about it later, she seemed flustered. "Gerald thought it would be best. He's planned a lot of business meetings during the trip anyway. You'd be bored." I later discovered through Aunt Paula that Gerald had initially included me in the plans, but had later convinced Mom that leaving me behind was for the best. He had systematically worked to exclude me from another family experience. I began documenting these incidents in a journal, partly to make sure I wasn't overreacting, and partly because something told me I might need evidence of this pattern someday. Meanwhile, I noticed other troubling dynamics. Mom no longer made any financial decisions. She had once been fiercely independent, managing our tight budget with impressive skill. Now she consulted Gerald before buying anything, even clothes or personal items. Her own savings account had been closed, merged into their joint account, which Gerald primarily controlled. She had become completely financially dependent on him, and he wielded that power like a weapon. The beautiful clothes and jewelry he bought her came with invisible strings. Her freedom had been traded for financial security, and I watched her shrink a little more each day. I took on extra shifts at the bookstore, saving as much as possible. Something inside me warned that I needed a financial cushion, a way out if things continued to deteriorate. I opened a separate bank account that only I knew about, depositing most of my paychecks there, rather than in the account Mom had helped me set up when I first started working. The final straw in this escalating tension came when my laptop suddenly stopped working. It contained all my college assignments, research, and papers. When I examined it, there was evidence of water damage, though I was always careful with it. Gerald feigned concern. "These things happen. Maybe you left a water bottle open near it." I never did. In fact, I had seen Gerald in my room the day before, supposedly looking for a book I had borrowed from him. A book I had already returned. I couldn't prove anything, but I knew. And from the way he barely hid his smirk as I frantically tried to save my files, I think he knew that I knew. That night, I backed up everything important to an external hard drive and kept it in my bag at all times. The battle lines had been drawn, though I didn't yet realize just how ugly the war would become. It was a Tuesday night when everything changed. I had come home late from studying at the library, trying to make up for the work I'd lost when my laptop was damaged. The house was quiet, but a light shone from beneath the door of Gerald's home office. As I passed by on the way to my room, I heard raised voices. "She's my daughter, Gerald." Mom's voice was strained, defensive in a way I rarely heard. "And I'm your husband," Gerald shot back. "I've put up with her for years now. She's an adult. It's time she moved out on her own. She's still in school. She can't afford a place by herself." "That's not my problem. I want her gone by the end of the month. It's her or me, Lisa. You need to choose." My heart hammered in my chest. Gerald had finally said out loud what his actions had been communicating for years. He wanted me gone, and he was forcing my mother to choose between us. What broke me wasn't Gerald's ultimatum. It was the long pause that followed. My mother, who had once been my fierce protector, was actually considering his demand. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity before she weakly responded. "She's my child, Gerald. I can't just throw her out." "You won't have to," he replied coldly. "I'll do it for you." I crept away to my room, tears streaming down my face. The truth I had been avoiding crashed down on me. My mother might actually choose this man over me. The thought was so painful I could barely breathe. Over the next few days, I noticed other disturbing signs. While reviewing our home security system for a class project on technology, I discovered Gerald had been monitoring my comings and goings through the security cameras. He had set up special alerts for when I entered or left the house. Then came the accusations. A pair of expensive cufflinks went missing from Gerald's dresser. He immediately suggested I might have taken them. "I noticed you admiring them last week," he said with false concern. I had never even seen the cufflinks before, let alone admired them. But what frightened me was Mom's response. "Naomi, if you took them, just give them back. Gerald won't be angry." She was starting to believe his lies about me. The cufflinks mysteriously reappeared a few days later in Gerald's car. He never apologized for the accusation. Things spiraled from there. I discovered Gerald had been opening my mail, including bank statements and college correspondence. When confronted, he claimed he thought they were bills or household matters. But the torn envelopes and carefully resealed contents told a different story. One evening, Gerald mentioned casually over dinner that some important business associates would be visiting the following month. "They'll be staying in the guest room for a week," he said, not looking at me. "It would be good if things were less cluttered around here by then." The meaning was clear. He wanted me gone before his associates arrived. I was an embarrassment, a complication, a piece of furniture that didn't match his perfect home aesthetic. Meanwhile, Mom grew increasingly distant. She spent more time at her social clubs and charity functions, avoiding being alone with me. When we did talk, our conversations were superficial, nothing like the deep heart-to-hearts we used to have. It was as if she was preemptively withdrawing to make the inevitable separation less painful. During this difficult time, I found myself thinking about my biological father more than I had in years. Mom had always told me he abandoned us when I was a baby, wanting nothing to do with fatherhood. I had a few old photos, but no contact with him. I'd made peace with his absence long ago. But with Mom pulling away, I felt completely untethered. On impulse, I searched his name online and found a social media profile. After days of internal debate, I sent him a message not expecting a response. To my shock, he replied within hours, expressing disbelief and joy at hearing from me. The story he told shattered everything I thought I knew. According to him, he had never abandoned us. Mom had left him, cutting off all contact and rejecting his attempts to be part of my life. He claimed to have sent birthday cards and child support for years, which I had never received. At first, I didn't believe him. It contradicted everything Mom had told me. But then he sent photos of returned letters and court documents showing his petitions for visitation rights that had been consistently opposed. It was overwhelming evidence that Mom had systematically kept him from me while crafting a narrative of abandonment. This revelation led to another disturbing discovery. While searching for my birth certificate to verify some details my father had mentioned, I found a box of letters in Mom's closet. Dozens of envelopes addressed to me in unfamiliar handwriting, all unopened. Birthday cards, holiday greetings, updates about his life and questions about mine. Years of attempted connection that Mom had hidden away. I sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by this evidence of betrayal, feeling as if the foundation of my life was crumbling. The mother I thought I knew had been lying to me for as long as I could remember, and now she was choosing a man who despised me over her own daughter. As the days passed, I felt increasingly like a ghost in the house, present but unseen. Gerald made phone calls about me while I was in the same room, as if I couldn't hear him discussing my presence as a problem to be solved. Mom avoided my eyes at breakfast, clutching her coffee cup like a shield. The walls were closing in, and I knew a final confrontation was inevitable. I just didn't realize how soon it would come, or how completely it would change everything. The night of the ultimatum came without warning. I had been walking on eggshells for weeks, spending as much time as possible at work or school to avoid the tension at home. But there was no avoiding the family dinner Gerald had insisted upon that Friday evening. From the moment I sat down at the ornate dining table, I could feel something was different. Gerald seemed almost cheerful, refilling Mom's wine glass repeatedly while shooting meaningful glances her way. Mom looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with her napkin. The expensive meal sat heavy in my stomach as Gerald began his campaign of complaints. Nothing I did was right. My college major was impractical. My job at the bookstore was beneath someone living in this neighborhood. Even the way I placed my fork on my plate apparently warranted criticism. I remained silent, pushing food around my plate, waiting for whatever storm was brewing to break. When it finally did, it was worse than I had imagined. "Gerald doesn't want you here anymore," Mom blurted out after her third glass of wine. Her words slurred slightly, but their impact was crystal clear. I froze, fork midway to my mouth. "What your mother means," Gerald smoothly interjected, "is that we think it's time you experienced independence. You're a grown woman now." "No," Mom said, surprising both of us with her directness. "Let's be honest. You don't like her, Gerald. You've never liked her." A heavy silence fell over the table. The truth, finally spoken aloud, hung in the air between us. "Is that true?" I asked, looking directly at Gerald. He didn't even have the decency to deny it. "You're not my child," he said simply. "I've supported you under my roof for years out of respect for your mother, but it's time for you to make your own way." I turned to Mom, hoping against hope that she would defend me. Stand up for me. Choose me. Instead, she said, "We need you to move out within 30 days. The words hit me like physical blows. 30 days. After everything we had been through together all the years, it had been just us against the world. She was giving me 30 days to vacate the only home I had. "You're choosing him over me," I whispered, tears threatening to spill. "It's not like that," Mom protested weakly. "We just think it's time." "It's exactly like that," I countered. "He gave you an ultimatum and you chose him." Gerald sat back in his chair, a smug satisfaction in his eyes as he watched our relationship fracture before him. "You could stay if you tried harder," Mom suggested, the words slurring together. "If you made more of an effort with Gerald." "I have been trying," I exclaimed, years of pent-up hurt bursting forth. "I've been trying since the day you married him. Nothing I do is ever enough because he decided long ago he didn't want me here." "Don't be dramatic," Gerald cut in. "This isn't personal. It's just time you stood on your own 2 feet." But it was personal. It had always been personal. From the moment he realized he couldn't completely possess my mother while I was still in the picture, he had been working toward this moment. "I understand if finances are a concern," Gerald added with false generosity. "I'm prepared to offer a small severance to help you get established elsewhere. $5,000 should be sufficient for a security deposit and a few months' rent somewhere appropriate." The way he said it made it clear he meant somewhere far less prestigious than his neighborhood, somewhere I belonged in his estimation. I looked at my mother, this woman who had once been my whole world. Her eyes were downcast, fixed on her wine glass. She had retreated into herself, allowing Gerald to handle the messy business of discarding her daughter. "Mom," I pleaded one last time, "is this really what you want?" She couldn't even look at me as she whispered, "It's for the best, Naomi." I stood up slowly, my dinner untouched. "I'll be out within 30 days. I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in bed sobbing until there were no tears left, feeling utterly abandoned. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it difficult to breathe. How could she do this? How could the mother who had once been my whole world throw me away for a man who had made it clear from the beginning that I was an inconvenience? Through my tears, I texted Taylor, the only person I could think to turn to. "They're kicking me out. 30 days. Her response was immediate. "My couch is yours for as long as you need it. We'll figure this out together." That simple offer of support was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. I wasn't completely alone. I had at least one person in my corner. The following morning, I began the painful process of sorting through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. Most of my childhood mementos were still in storage boxes in the attic. I would need to go through those as well. It was while retrieving those boxes that I stumbled across something unexpected. In my search, I accidentally knocked over a file box labeled Personal Gerald. Several folders spilled out, and as I moved to replace them, a document caught my eye. It was a prenuptial agreement between Gerald and my mother, but with strange addendums I hadn't known about. Curiosity and a growing sense of unease led me to look closer. What I found in that box would change everything. The documents I discovered in Gerald's office told a story very different from the one I had been living. As I sifted through them, my hands trembling, I realized I had stumbled upon evidence of Gerald's true nature and his systematic manipulation of my mother. The prenuptial agreement wasn't unusual for someone of Gerald's wealth, but the addendums were troubling. One specified that if the marriage ended within 10 years, Mom would receive almost nothing regardless of the reason for divorce. Another required her to transfer her modest savings and property into joint accounts under his control. But it was the other papers that truly shocked me. Financial statements showing how Gerald had gradually moved Mom's money into accounts she couldn't access. Emails to financial advisors instructing them to exclude her from certain investment discussions. A separate document detailing how he had convinced her to sign over the deed to the small property she had inherited from her grandmother, supposedly for tax purposes. There were also printed emails between Gerald and his friends joking about how he had tamed the independent single mom and finally got her to realize her place. The casual cruelty of his words made me physically ill. Most disturbing of all was a folder containing information about another woman named Catherine, who appeared to have been in a relationship with Gerald before my mother. The pattern was eerily similar. Catherine had been a single mother with a teenage son. Gerald had charmed her, married her, then systematically isolated her from friends and family. When she finally tried to leave him after discovering financial improprieties, he had leveraged the prenuptial agreement to leave her with almost nothing. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully replaced the documents exactly as I had found them. My mind was racing. This wasn't just about Gerald not liking me or wanting me gone. This was about control. Complete total control of my mother and her assets. I was simply an obstacle to that control, a reminder of her independence before him. The next day, I reached out to Taylor's father, who was an attorney. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to get his professional opinion on the documents I had discovered. "These are concerning. he said after reviewing the photos I had taken. Some of these clauses are potentially unenforceable, and if he's been hiding assets or coercing financial decisions that could constitute financial abuse. What about these business documents? I asked, showing him some papers that contained references to offshore accounts and unusual transfers. Mr. Reeves frowned. I'm not a financial crime specialist, but some of these transactions look questionable at best. Has your mother seen any of this? I don't think so, I replied. She's completely under his influence now. Naomi, you need to be careful, he warned. Men like Gerald who go to these lengths to control people can be dangerous when threatened. I took his advice seriously, developing a plan to protect both myself and potentially my mother. If Gerald wanted me gone, fine. But I wasn't going to leave her in his clutches without at least trying to open her eyes. Over the next few days, I gathered more evidence methodically. I created backup copies of everything and stored them in multiple secure locations. I researched Gerald's business dealings, further identifying patterns that suggested possible tax evasion and potentially fraudulent activities. I also tried one last time to reach my mother. I caught her alone one afternoon while Gerald was at a golf meeting. Mom, can we really talk like we used to? She looked nervous, glancing at her watch. Gerald will be home in a couple of hours. That's plenty of time, I said, sitting beside her on the sofa. Mom, are you happy? Truly happy? She seemed startled by the question. Of course I am. We have everything we ever wanted. No, you have everything he wanted for you, I corrected gently. The country club membership, the designer clothes, the charity committees. But what about the things you used to want? Your photography, your dream of opening that little cafe, your friends from before? A flicker of something passed across her face, quickly suppressed. People change, Naomi. Dreams change. Or they get replaced by someone else's vision, I suggested. When was the last time you made a decision without consulting Gerald first? When was the last time you spent money without worrying about his approval? That's not fair, she protested weakly. Marriage is about partnership. Partnership, yes, not control, not isolation. I took a deep breath. Mom, I found some documents in the attic, financial records, emails, things Gerald has been hiding from you. Her expression hardened immediately. You were snooping through his private papers, Naomi. How could you? It was as if a wall came down between us. She wasn't ready to hear it. Gerald's conditioning ran too deep. I'll be moving out next week, I said quietly, accepting defeat for now. I've found a small apartment I can afford with my savings and bookstore job. So soon. For a moment, she looked genuinely sad. Gerald said you had the full 30 days. I think it's better this way, I replied. Cleaner break. She nodded, then hesitated before asking, will you keep in touch? The question broke my heart. Even now, she was placing the responsibility on me as if she wasn't the one who had chosen her husband over her daughter. That's up to you, Mom. You know where to find me if you ever need me. With that conversation, I realized I needed more ammunition before confronting Gerald. Through careful research, I managed to locate Catherine, his ex-wife. Our meeting in a quiet cafe across town was illuminating. He did the same thing to me, she confirmed after hearing my story. Isolated me, controlled my finances, turned me against my son. By the time I realized what was happening, I had signed away most of my rights and assets. How did you get away? I asked. My brother finally staged an intervention, showed me evidence of Gerald's manipulations similar to what you've found. It was only then that I saw the full picture. She sighed heavily. I lost almost everything in the divorce because of that prenup, but I got my life back. My son and I have rebuilt our relationship, though those years of damage took time to repair. Catherine provided additional information about Gerald's business practices and personal habits that proved invaluable. She also introduced me to two of Gerald's former business partners who had parted ways with him over ethical concerns. Armed with this comprehensive dossier of evidence, I scheduled a meeting with both Gerald and my mother for the day before my planned move. I told them I wanted to discuss the terms of my departure and Gerald's generous severance offer. Gerald looked triumphant as we gathered in his home office, clearly believing he had won. Mom sat beside him, subdued and uncomfortable. So you've accepted the inevitable. Gerald began, sliding a check across the desk. 5,000 as promised. I'll need you to sign this release indicating you have no further claims on this household. I picked up the check, examined it briefly, then set it back down. Actually, Gerald, I have a counterproposal. His smile faltered slightly. I'm not negotiating, Naomi. The amount is more than fair. Oh, I'm not asking for more money, I said calmly. At least not for myself. With that, I placed a folder on his desk and opened it to reveal copies of the most damning documents I had discovered. I know everything, I stated simply. The financial manipulation, the hidden accounts, the questionable business transactions with the Anderson Group, your history with Catherine and how you treated her son. The color drained from Gerald's face. Beside him, Mom looked bewildered. What is she talking about, Gerald? He recovered quickly, his shock transforming to anger. She's lying, making things up because she's bitter about being asked to leave. Am I? I withdrew my phone and played a recording of my conversation with one of his former business partners detailing specific instances of financial impropriety. You've been recording people, that's illegal, Gerald sputtered. Actually, in this state, single-party consent is all that's required. I informed him, thanking Mr. Reeves silently for that particular piece of legal advice. Mom was looking at the documents now, her confusion turning to horror as she began to understand what she was seeing. Gerald, what is this? Why is my name on these offshore accounts? And what's this about my grandmother's property? Lisa, don't listen to her, Gerald urged, reaching for the papers. She's manipulating you. No, Gerald, you've been manipulating her, I countered. For years, just like you did with Catherine before her. His face contorted with rage. You think anyone will believe you over me? I'll destroy you. I have connections you can't even imagine. That's why copies of everything have already been sent to secure locations, I replied steadily. If anything happens to me or to my mother, those documents go directly to the IRS, the SEC, and several news outlets. The power in the room had shifted palpably. For the first time since I'd known him, Gerald looked afraid. What do you want? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. I want my mother protected. A fair settlement that gives her true financial independence, not the pittance in your prenup. And I want my education fully funded through graduation. Those are my non-negotiable terms. And if I refuse, then I walk out of here today and make a phone call that starts a process you can't stop, I said simply. Your business reputation, your social standing, possibly even your freedom, all gone. The threat hung in the air between us. Mom was still poring over the documents, tears streaming down her face as she absorbed the extent of Gerald's deception. You wouldn't dare, Gerald challenged, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me, I responded, meeting his gaze steadily. I have nothing left to lose, Gerald. You made sure of that. In that moment, looking into his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before: respect. Not affection or warmth, but a grudging acknowledgement that he had underestimated me. That in trying to remove an inconvenient stepdaughter, he had created a formidable adversary. I'll have my lawyer draw up terms, he finally conceded. No, we will have independent counsel review any agreement, I corrected him. No more manipulation. As I walked out of that office, leaving Gerald to face my mother's questions and recriminations, I felt no triumph, only sadness that it had come to this. But I also felt something else: strength. In trying to break me, Gerald had inadvertently revealed a power within myself I hadn't known existed. True to his word, though, undoubtedly motivated by self-preservation rather than integrity, Gerald agreed to my terms. Within a week, legal documents were drawn up ensuring my mother would receive a fair settlement regardless of whether she chose to remain in the marriage. She would regain control of her inherited property and receive a substantial sum to establish her own financial independence. For me, a separate trust was created to cover my educational expenses through graduate school if I chose to continue. It was placed under my sole control, removing Gerald's ability to use my education as leverage. Despite these victories, I still moved out as planned. The house had never truly been my home, and the emotional damage was too severe to simply paper over with legal agreements. I found a small but comfortable apartment near campus, using some of the trust money for the security deposit and furnishings. The day I moved, Mom helped me carry boxes to my car. Gerald remained conspicuously absent. "I'm sorry," she said as we stood in my empty bedroom. "I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not willing to offer easy absolution. "But Gerald is expert at manipulation. He isolated you systematically just like he did with Catherine." Mom flinched at the name. She had spoken with Catherine herself now, and the similarities in their stories had shaken her deeply. "Are you going to stay with him?" I asked the question that had been hanging between us. She sighed heavily. "I honestly don't know. Everything looks different now. I need time to think to figure out who I am apart from him." It wasn't the definitive break I might have hoped for, but it was a start. At least she was questioning the relationship rather than blindly accepting his version of reality. "Whatever you decide, you have options now," I reminded her. "Real financial independence. Don't forget that." We hugged awkwardly before I drove away, our relationship damaged but not entirely destroyed. Only time would tell if we could rebuild what had been broken. In my new apartment, I began the process of creating a life truly my own. I transferred to a 4-year university the following semester, using the trust funds to focus on my education without needing to work full-time. I changed my major from business, which had been Gerald's suggestion, to psychology, with a focus on helping victims of emotional and financial abuse. Gradually, I reconnected with my biological father. Our relationship was tentative at first, heavy with the weight of lost years and misunderstandings. But as we shared our separate versions of the past, a clearer picture emerged of how my mother's fears and Gerald's influence had kept us apart. It wasn't a perfect reunion story, but it added another dimension to my understanding of family and the complex motivations that drive people's actions. 6 months after moving out, I received a call from Mom. Her voice sounded different, stronger somehow. "I've left Gerald," she said without preamble. "I'm staying with Aunt Paula for now." Relief flooded through me. "Are you okay?" "No," she admitted. "I'm angry and hurt and embarrassed, but I will be okay eventually. The evidence you found gave me the strength to leave." We met for coffee the following week. The woman across the table looked both familiar and strange. She had discarded the designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair that had been her uniform during the Gerald years. Instead, she wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more like the mom I remembered from before. "I have a lot to make up for," she said, clutching her coffee cup. "With you especially. I don't expect forgiveness right away or maybe ever, but I want you to know I'm getting help. Therapy. Support groups for women leaving controlling relationships." "That's good," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "Everyone needs support during major life changes." "I found my old camera," she added with a small smile. "I've started taking pictures again." It was a tiny thing, but it represented something important, a reclaiming of the passions and interests Gerald had systematically devalued, a return to the woman she had been before him. Our relationship remained complicated. Trust once broken doesn't mend easily. But we established new boundaries and began the slow process of reconnection, not as the mother-daughter unit we had once been, but as two adult women with a shared history and the possibility of a different future. As for me, I discovered an unexpected calling. I started a support group for young adults from controlling family situations, drawing on my own experience to help others recognize the warning signs of manipulation and financial abuse. What began as informal meetings in my apartment grew into a recognized campus resource, eventually expanding to include an online community reaching people nationwide. I also established firm boundaries in my personal relationships, hyper-aware of the red flags I had missed or ignored in Gerald's behavior. I became an advocate for financial literacy, especially for young women, giving talks about the importance of maintaining financial independence, even within committed relationships. The journey wasn't easy. There were nights I woke up from nightmares about Gerald, days when anger at my mother threatened to overwhelm the fragile bridge we were rebuilding. Therapy helped, as did the strong friendships I cultivated, particularly with Taylor, who had stood by me through the darkest times. 2 years after leaving Gerald's house, I received an unexpected email from Brianna, Gerald's biological daughter. We had never been close, our interactions limited to awkward holiday gatherings when she visited from college. "I heard what my father did," she wrote. "I want you to know I had no idea how he was treating you. I'm sorry I didn't see it or try to help. If you're willing, I'd like to meet and talk." That coffee meeting led to an unlikely friendship. Brianna had her own complicated relationship with Gerald, different from mine, but not without its own challenges. Together, we pieced together a more complete picture of the man who had shaped both our lives in such different ways. Looking back now, 5 years removed from that final confrontation in Gerald's office, I can see how the experience transformed me. The girl who entered that house at 16, hopeful for a happy blended family, died a slow death over the years of Gerald's subtle cruelty. But from that loss emerged a stronger, more discerning woman who understood her own worth wasn't determined by others' validation. The money from the educational trust gave me opportunities I might not otherwise have had, but the real value of my inheritance from those difficult years was less tangible. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize manipulation in its many forms, and most importantly, to stand firm in the face of intimidation. Family, I discovered, isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's created through respect, honesty, and mutual support. My found family of close friends, my reconnected biological father, and yes, my slowly healing relationship with Mom taught me that genuine love doesn't seek to control or diminish. It empowers and uplifts. The journey from victim to advocate wasn't one I would have chosen, but it gave my suffering meaning and purpose. Every time I help another young person recognize and escape a controlling situation, I reclaim another piece of what Gerald tried to take from me. So yes, when my mother told me I had to leave because my stepdad didn't like me, I left. But not empty-handed. I took with me not just financial security, but wisdom, strength, and the power to help others find their way out of similar situations. The ultimate victory wasn't in the legal agreements or financial settlements. It was in reclaiming my story and using it to light the way for others still finding their path through darkness. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to diminish your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept someone else's narrative about who you are. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.